Hi and welcome back to the garden. A very happy new year to you all. I'm here in the summer house, and if you can see behind me, it's a very snowy day today, and it's a perfect time for us to be sowing some seeds that need the cold process in order to germinate. So I'm going to be showing you 3 seeds in this video that I'm going to be sowing now in January, and the process of the cold stratification will actually mean that we'll get germination once the weather warms up. I'm first going to explain what seed stratification is, and it's simply the process of mimicking the natural conditions that a seed goes through in order to break the dormancy. Now in the case of cold stratification, that just means the seed needs a period of cold and damp followed by a period of warm, and we can do that easily by sowing our seeds in the autumn through to before the spring. And this would happen naturally when a seed falls from the ground, it drops onto the soil, it goes through the period of winter. We have the cold, the rain, we have the snow and the ice, and then come the spring we get the warmer weather, the lighter weather, and then the seed then germinates. This is actually a survival mechanism of the seed, so it's really interesting because when the seed is dropped in the autumn, if it was to germinate there and then, it's unlikely to survive the winter. So the seed has an inbuilt mechanism in order to protect it from germination there and then. So the seed falls to the ground, it has the period of winter followed by the period of spring. When the spring comes, it then signals to the seed, here's now the time to be germinating because now conditions are more favourable. And you usually find that these type of seeds have a much thicker coat, and the action of the winter cold, the freezing, the thawing and the winter damp softens that coat. So by the time the spring comes, that seed is then ready to be germinating. The very first seed I'm going to sow today is Lychnis coronaria, and this was seed we collected from our own plants in the autumn. So these were collected last September and stored, and these do need the cold stratification. They germinate much better after a period of the cold. So what I'm going to do first is I have a tray of compost. I've got a nice label so I know which is which, and I'm just going to place a handful of seeds on the palm of my hand. And then I'm going to sprinkle them just over the surface of this compost, making sure the compost first is nice and firm in that tray. Now I'm not going to sow too many, I'm going to be quite sparse because we do have a problem with how much space we do have left in the garden, so I'm not going to sow too many so we don't run with too many plants. So a nice handful. I'm going to put those ones back. And then using some vermiculite, I'm going to use this to cover the seeds. Now Lychnis coronaria seeds require light to germinate, so you can either leave them like that completely uncovered, or if like me you do like to have a covering on the top, this vermiculite is perfect because this will allow the light in as well. So I'm just going to place a light covering over the top of those seeds. Just so the surface of the compost you can no longer see. Then if we firm that down, allowing good contact with the seed and the compost, that's the first one done. Now Lychnis coronaria is a beautiful perennial. It's quite a short-lived plant, so it does require that it either self-seeds or that we do this ourselves and produce more plants. Otherwise, after maybe 4 or 5 years, you're probably going to find that you lose it. It flowers with some beautiful magenta flowers between June and September, and if you keep deadheading it throughout the season, it will keep producing those flowers for you. The varieties also come in white, and you can also get one in a bicolour which is a magenta and a white centre, which is also a beautiful one. It's quite a drought tolerant plant. It does like to have full sun and be in a position that is free draining. It's an excellent cottage garden plant, perfect grown with other perennials or grasses. The silver stems and the silver leaves make it a brilliant contrast to the other perennials within the border. It grows to around 85 centimetres tall by about 50 centimetres wide, and it has the ability to mingle because of those long stems with other perennials, and it makes some wonderful contrasting planting combos with your other neighbouring plants. It's also a plant that's great for wildlife. It has an open centre, which means that the bees, the butterflies and even the moths really enjoy this plant. So this is a great plant if you want to plant a wildlife garden. My next seed is Liatris spicata, and this is a beautiful perennial and very unique flowers. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing I did with the Lychnis. I have a tray of multi-purpose compost with a label already in there, and I'm just going to spread some of these seeds on the surface of this compost. And the seeds are quite thin, brownish colour, quite easy to handle, so it's quite easy to grab a few and pinch a few, spacing thinly on the top of this compost. Making sure you don't spread them too thick, give them some space to grow when they do germinate. And then again, using the vermiculite, we'll spread it over the top. Now these don't require light to germinate, so you don't have to worry about what you put on top. But I just find this vermiculite is a perfect topping to cover seeds. And when you see those green little tiny leaves starting to come through on this brownish kind of medium, it's really, really exciting. Press them down, giving them good contact with the compost below, and that's that easily done. Now Liatris spicata is quite a long flowering perennial. It's very hardy. It has unique tall flower spikes featuring tiny bright purple bottle brush flowers. The flowers come around mid to late summer and go into early autumn, so it's a really long flowering perennial. The height is quite good as well. It gets to about 1.5 meters tall with a spread of around 45 to 50 centimeters wide. It's another fantastic perennial for wildlife. You get the bees, you get the butterflies, and if you're lucky enough, when those seed heads start to appear, once the flowers go over, you may find that you get a rush of goldfinches getting in there and taking those seeds. So it's a really good plant, not just for the bees, the pollinators and the butterflies and the moths, but also for the birds. This plant requires a sunny position, but it's not too fussy about soil, so long as it's not overly damp. Liatris spicata can also be grown through corms, which we plant in the spring, and we'll do another video separate to this in the spring when we do this, because we'll get the flowers from the corms that same year. With regards to these seeds, you're going to have to be patient. You may be waiting maybe 2 or 3 years before you get the first flowers. Now the last seed I'm going to show you today is Aconitum napellus, and this is a form of monkshood. It's quite a toxic plant. Every part of it is toxic, including the seeds. So I've got some gloves at the ready today because I don't want to have anything toxic on my hands. So using the gloves, I've got another tray of multi-purpose compost which is ready with a label in it already. So with regards to these seeds, like I say, be careful. If you do use them on your hands, remember to wash them afterwards, because if you ingest this, it can be very poisonous. So I'm going to do it directly from the seed packet, and I'm just going to spread as thinly as I can onto the top of this compost. Now Now again, these are quite big seeds, so if you have plant trays you can station sow these into individual modules. But I thought today I'd do them all just using these trays to make things easy. So I'm just sprinkling some out over the surface of that compost. That's probably enough. And then I'm also going to use some more vermiculite just to put over the top. And then firm that down with your hands. And then that's all good to go. So Aconitum is a beautiful tall perennial. It's a hardy perennial with blue purple flowers that resemble the hood from a monk's cloak, and that's what gives it its name, its common name of monk's hood. It's an excellent cottage garden plant that can be a great substitute for delphiniums, because as we all know, delphiniums get ravaged by the slugs. This one, the slugs are much more sensible. They know it's poisonous and they keep away from it. It's quite a tall plant, growing to about 1.2 meters tall with a spread of around 50 centimeters. Now, as I've already said, all parts of the plant are toxic, not only to people but also to pets. So if you have pets in the garden, dogs that you know go rummaging around in the borders, I do not advise growing this plant. Also, if you have small children that like to pick plants and they're not always great at washing their hands after touching things in the garden, I don't advise growing this if you have small children either. This plant will grow in sun to part shade, and it will tolerate a moist soil. The flowers come out around June to July, but when they come out they are beautiful, very tall, very elegant, very sophisticated, and like I say, perfect again for a cottage garden style planting scheme, and also good for wildlife. You often see the bees getting inside those little hoods and taking all the pollen that they require from the flowers. So I'm going to take these trays outside, give them a good water, and then leave them. They're going to be outside in all the elements, in the cold, the snow, the ice, in the wet, and that is what we want. We want them to experience all this different temperature range, and then when the warmer weather comes in the spring, that will then stimulate the seed to germinate. There are other plants that require cold stratification, and some of those include some of the echinaceas, astrantia, primulas and eryngium. Now, we did do a video a while ago about how to sow eryngium planum, and it was primula viris which we sown back in the autumn, and if you want to see the video we did on that, there will be a link just at the top right hand side there that you can click on and see what we did with those. But it's exactly the same process. We put the seeds onto a tray, cover them up, take them outside, give them a water and leave them to their own devices, and then come the spring we check on them for germination. Thank you so much for watching this video and joining me today sowing these seeds. I do hope you found it informative, and I hope you found it enjoyable. Please give us a like if you have. Please subscribe. Subscribing is free and you'll get to see all the videos that we have as they come out. And if you've got any comments, please leave them in the comments box below the video. We'll see you very soon on the next one. In the meantime, please do take care.